Welcome everybody to this CHAMP webinar on innovation. Good morning, evening or afternoon. My name is Bart-Jan Haasbeek. I am based in Amsterdam and I am CHAMP's Events and Engagement Manager. Today we will be discussing Internet of Things. And although IoT has been around for 22 years, it is still innovative and not just within the air cargo industry. Innovation stands for a new or changed entity creating or redistributing value. Internet of Things, the new connectivity, creating new opportunities, and the business of IoT. Before we move on, I would like to address a few housekeeping items. Today's webinar will be around 60 minutes. Everybody will receive a recording of the webinar automatically tomorrow. And the audience today are all the stakeholders in the supply chain. We would like to engage with you and have lined up 2 sets of poll questions. And if you would like to ask us some questions, please do not hesitate to use the tool, and we will address the questions at the end of the webinar. And if there are too many questions, we will get back to you via email. If you want to reach out to us later via email, you will see the email address also at the end of the webinar. Today's agenda, we will start with an introduction of the panelists. Then Marion will explain about IoT connectivity. Is that driving the customer experience? Then the CHAMP perspective, the future of IoT, looking forward. How IoT transforms logistics. DB's Schenker IoT platform, a multimodal, quite interesting also. And then there is a panel discussion, the view from a customer, where we will also have some questions. And then the Q&A and the summary of today's webinar. Please let me introduce today's speakers. From the Netherlands, we welcome Marion Freijsen, Strategic Business Advisor, Commerce Strategy of ADOBE. Marion is a long-term technology professional with a career in technology companies that spans over 20 years. From our CHAMP head office in Luxembourg, we welcome Fernandez, Head of Innovation, and from The Hague in the Netherlands, the CEO of Freijsen, Jimmy Wind. And last but not least, from Germany, David Pollender, Head of Business Development, IoT for DB Schenker AG. Let's move on to our first speaker, Marion Freijsen. Marion will explain how IoT is a technology that helps to serve our customers. Let me hand over the mouse sharing to you, Marion. And you now have keyboard and mouse control.
Okay, good morning, everybody. Marion Freijsen speaking. As Bart-Jan already mentioned, I'm a strategic business advisor at ADOBE, and in my prior role, I was COO and C-level at multiple companies, the last one being an e-commerce company. So I'd like to talk to you about Internet of Things. Bart-Jan, I don't think I have the mouse control. I'd like you to click through if you don't mind.
Yeah.
So Internet of Things, it's definitely a great topic to discuss, and we all know that IoT is everywhere already. We're happily bringing it into our homes and daily lives in lots of different ways. Next. The building blocks of Internet of Things, shown in the next picture, are multifold and allow us to collect data automatically at all these different touch points. However, rather than talk about the building blocks themselves, I'd like to take a little sidestep today and connect the dots a bit differently, sharing some thoughts from my professional perspective dealing with customers. Basically, the tools that we use and that we offer to consumers, whether it's a fridge in your home or a tool that measures pets' welfare during their journey, all collect data. But what we actually do with that data is the step that I'd like to share some thoughts on. Amidst all of this, let's not forget that we're dealing with humans at the end of the day. And those humans expect the companies that they deal with to look after their interests and offer them an interesting experience when dealing with them. So how do we link to customer experience? And what is customer experience management? The first thing to point out is that customers, whether it's a company or an end consumer, expect more and more from the companies that they choose to deal with. And they're far more demanding in how they expect to be treated. It's no longer sufficient to offer a simple exchange. A customer is looking for the experience now, from beginning to end of their interaction with you. And data that you collect can be of great help here. Building a great customer experience always sounds like a super simple idea, but actually delivering it is much harder. And that challenge often centers around a very simple statement. Legacy systems most enterprises rely on today can't keep up with customers' high expectations for personalization. Those systems were built for a different era, another task oftentimes, and the challenges extend way beyond the technology. Businesses can be paralyzed by organizational silos, lack of process, the disability to execute on customer engagement strategies. And whatever the industry you're in, those challenges are even greater now, of course, in COVID-19. So what do we really mean when we talk about customer experience management? So here's Adobe's definition, and those from some of the other players in this space. Our focus is on orchestrating and personalizing the end-to-end experience, and those are keywords to listen out to and listen out for when you speak with your customers. Marion, a couple of clicks, please. So there's a couple of other definitions here from people in the space. It's all about orchestrating and personalizing that end-to-end journey. Next slide. So looking at the core elements of customer experience, it's clear that there is a lot that needs to change, let alone now that we bring IoT as a different channel into the deal and the additional data and opportunities that that brings with it. These days, customers demand experience, not just a singular moment of interaction. And the experience trend we're facing means that customers need to move from being internally focused to being externally focused. And you need to move with that. It's about putting that customer experience at the heart of your business. The challenge is that customer expectations are so much greater than before. And whether it's a consumer or a corporation, they demand that we meet those expectations, not just in a single channel like face-to-face, but across a growing set of varied and growing channels. And today, customers don't want you to tell them which channel to interact with them on. They want to lead the way, and you have to follow their path. And that won't change with the introduction of IoT. It just adds another layer of complication. Customers do what they want on the channels they choose across web, mobile, social, in-store. They expect us to interact with them in one single voice. A great example is shown on the slide here. All the ways a customer interacts in a number of different ways across many different tools and touch points that happen at the airport. Here is a customer example, but it could easily be a cargo player's example as well. It's often difficult to map multi-channel strategies to traveler and cargo behaviors. Complexity of current front-end and back-end systems make it difficult to implement personalization solutions. And with IoT, you're picking up even more data on all of these touch points than ever before, which really mean that you have to focus on how to digitize processes and create that seamless experience to your end consumer. Right now, we have an opportunity for differentiation and competitive edge. And the ability to personalize in real time across the customer journey is super important in that. Lastly, it's important that you understand that customer experience management is not just about consistent messaging across different channels, but more importantly, it also needs to happen at scale, meaning you have to personalize and at the same time make it as automated as possible so that you can allow to do this for larger volumes, larger groups of customers and consumers. And that adds another dimension for the many companies as you are looking for omni-channel scalability with multiple data inputs, channels, and preferences. So now let's link this back to the Internet of Things, where objects collect data. It's how we link that data back to the experience we give our customers that's truly important. IoT is not just about productivity or analyzing or monitoring, but it's about turning data into an asset that allows us to enhance our customers' experience with us. It's great that we're able to collect so much more data, but it could also turn into a negative aspect if we merely collect rather than think about how it will benefit our customers. So back to my original example, just talking about the fridge monitoring everything that happens inside it. So the fridge may actually tell you the milk is finished. It may even tell you to buy soy instead of full fat, as your cholesterol is too high. But wouldn't it be great and a little bit frightening at the same time if it also allows you to complete the customer experience right on the panel of the fridge door with branding and a voice being the same as the one you have across all the other channels? It's just an example, but it shows you that there's tons of ways that the introduction of IoT will disrupt existing models. You can be ahead of that curve by thinking about it now and preparing your organization for it. So let IoT be a positive step where data becomes a positive driver, not just for your organization, but for your customers as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Marion. That was very interesting. Yeah, sounds a bit like how e-commerce also evolved, and now with Internet of Things, we are all accustomed to e-commerce, but also quite of us have a lot of IoT at home already. You mentioned the fridge. I have a vacuum cleaner, which I can turn on with an app, and also my washer dryer. Let's see how this will evolve in our industry. Thank you, Marion. I'm sure there will be questions later on. Before that, we would like to ask you a few questions, the audience. And let me launch the first poll question. So the first poll question, which you see on the screen now, is your company planning IoT as a service? Currently, you are running a project in planning for this year, planned for the future after COVID, or you are not planning any IoT. So how is your company looking at IoT as we speak? So the votes are getting in slowly but steadily. I will give this 10 to 15 more seconds, and then I will share the results live on the screen. And actually, it's going pretty well. Many people voting, and the percentage is rising and rising. Yes, let me close the and share the results. And Lucas, if you could comment on this, what you see. 34 planned in the future after COVID, 31 are currently running a project. What does this tell you?
Well, it's quite, we have two group of people who voted in that case, and it's a little bit the feeling that we share speaking with customer. So on one side, definitively, COVID increased the need for digitization, and people are going for it, and IoT is one of the way. On the other one, COVID is impacting our budget, and so a few companies had to delay for after.
Yeah, that ties in also what you just mentioned to the next question. Does COVID accelerate your IoT schedule? So I wonder how the audience thinks about that. Another question is, does IoT also increase digitalization? But let's now focus on, does COVID accelerate your IoT schedule? There is a need, you see, across all industries for more communication and digitalization, and I'm sure IoT is part of that as well, but let's see what the audience thinks. And mention that the results are pretty even, surprisingly even. So, and again, very high percentage of votes. And now there is a clear winner, not so that clear, but let me also share these results.
Well, I believe that the result in that case are also a little bit reflecting our audience that is split between different actors in our supply chain. But yes, it's just like before. It's a part is impacted only.
Yes, indeed. So later on we have 2 additional questions. Let's now move on to you, Lucas, as a speaker. Yes, could you tell us more about the perspective of Jan?
Yes, with pleasure, Bartian. So I would like to start the presentation by sharing a little bit our vision about the future. So at Champ, we believe that everything in our supply chain will become smarter, which means that we are getting a very bright future for IoT that is coming. So we envision an air cargo supply chain where a sensor in the future will be put in every ship box. So it's a question that when they will be disposable, we really believe that they will be everywhere, which will open very new interesting usage because the sensor could start to communicate and to interact with its environment. So it could interact with the cargo around it. It could interact with the ULD around it. It could speak with the employees that are handling the freight, which will mean that, for example, you will know what is inside the shipment without having to consult the database. You could know what is its temperature. And for example, if you see pharma shipment that is too long in the sun, you could react. You will start to communicate with the equipment around it. Maybe if it's something that is very fragile, you should not go at 30 km/h when you handle it on the ramp. And what is also very interesting is that it will communicate end-to-end from the production facility to the end shelf for the consumer. And that will enable really to monitor along the whole supply chain what's happening deep inside it, and that should help us to create new services. But with a strong and beautiful vision and the promise of new services come also many challenges. So right now, one of the big challenges that is starting to rise is the multiplication of the manufacturer, of sensor, I mean, which means that the silo and the ecosystem are multiplicating. There is also many way to collect the data. Some communicate in Bluetooth, so communicate in GSM, in NFC, in 5G. So there is a real complexity of collecting this information. And those ecosystems also tend to be quite close, which is very nice for the beginning, because when you're in a closed ecosystem, it's simple to deploy, it's very fast, you can answer faster the need of your customer. But when you start to have 2, 3, 4 manufacturers and that you have those silo of data that are multiplicating on the side, you start to need something to orchestrate and make all of that more coherent. So that's a problem that we will need to address in the future. Readers are starting already to multiplicate in the warehouses right now. Another barrier to entry that is dear to my heart because it's about innovation. Certification is complex, which means that less startups are able to enter easily into our industry and to provide new sensor, new technologies that could help us to create services. So on that, I really think that we will need in the future to find a way to help better those companies to enter, lower the barrier to entry for them, So we keep a good level of safety, but we are also easing this flow. The last point, it's about cybersecurity. I think it's something that maybe we don't speak as often as we should. Nonetheless, IoT is very critical in that sense, because there is a clear trend now that you can go to communicate directly with one sensor that is in one shipment and set up it or make it execute a little bit of intelligence. That's very nice. You can do very beautiful things, get smart alarm. But on the other side, that also means that this sensor could potentially start to interact with the equipment around it and maybe disturb them, become a relay for an attack. So it's really important that we keep in mind that it's not just about buying sensor and deploying them, but there is a risk to which one we expose our business, and we need just to keep it in mind and plan for it. So where do we go? I already addressed the vision. I spoke about the challenges. Now, how do we leverage that wave to come? Well, I already spoke a little bit about it, but it's really a great opportunity to create new services. An airline, a GHA, a freight forwarder can totally rent a sensor now and sell them as a service that can be just a one-time purchase. And we really believe that it's a trend that will continue to develop. At Champ, we computed that by 2026, we will collect around 35 billion data points. One data point being, for example, a temperature at a precise time for 2026, which is a lot of data that will be generated by all those services in the future. You could, beyond just the sensor, also work on easing the flow of the communication. I believe that there really is really a value just in collecting the data of the sensors that are coming from a shipper and retransmitting them to him, so he's able to collect better information on the quality of the service and improve it for himself, and also for yourself as a new business to benefit from it from an operation standpoint. Where can I improve? It's also the opportunity of working on transforming the data, because when you collect it, just a temperature like that maybe is not an information, but if you can start to analyze for the shipper where the incidents are happening, or for yourself, or what is your quality of service, or combining data to know that, for example, maybe it's only when it's above 25 degrees outside that you're having a problem, that's called an insight. And an insight, speaking with shipper, is something that they are very keen into acquiring, transforming, and for us, a very great opportunity to create new services. And that's all for my part. So I really hope that you enjoy the presentation, and looking forward to the question on the second part of this webinar. Thank you very much.
Yes. Thank you, Lucas. Thank you. There are questions coming in. Let me address one question. How do you ensure interoperability between different IoT services? Or you could also answer this later, but maybe you have an answer now. How do you ensure interoperability between different IoT devices, it says?
So I think that will be very well covered by David, because for that you need an IoT platform. So you need to build something that is on top of it. So you need to build to use a product on top of it. But David will answer the question.
That will be a good answer then later on. So let us go to the next question. Next panelist, Jimmy Wind, CEO of Versa. And Jimmy, Lucas mentioned challenges and also mentioned that there are many manufacturers. I'm curious how you see that, but let's start your presentation first. Thank you.
All right, good morning all in the webinar. My name is Jimmy Wind. I'm, as Bart-Jan mentioned, CEO of Versa. I've been in IoT for quite a while, since 2013. Before joining Versa, I was managing director of KPN's Internet of Things business unit. Versa is an IoT company which originally focused on tracking baggage. We enable airlines to provide superior baggage to their passengers in combination with partnerships like CETA and OIG. And with our tracker and platform, we enable airlines in cooperation with their ground handlers to prevent bags from missing their flight. And if they do miss a flight, they can enable a quick return to the owner. As you can imagine, because of COVID-19, the passenger travel has been hit hard, so all projects that we were working on with airlines and airports were put on hold, and as a consequence, last year we extended our focus to a broader range of cargo and asset tracking use cases, and for that we modified our hardware, adding additional sensors, and also made them work on not just airplanes but also all modes of transportation. I will today focus on explaining how IoT in logistics works, what the benefits are for using it, and I will finish with some recommendations on how to successfully implement this in practice. Marion already mentioned that customers are becoming increasingly demanding because of technological progress, mainly. This faces challenges for logistics, but you could obviously also call them opportunities. Customers want to know where their shipments are in real time, and they expect the goods to arrive in perfect shape at the destination. And increasing competition in global logistics also puts pressure on pricing, which requires increasing efficiency to reduce costs to remain competitive. And Internet of Things, obviously, that's what the webinar's for, will help face these challenges by providing near real-time visibility throughout the whole supply chain. Internet of Things in logistics starts obviously with the thing, with devices. Devices generally contain three types of technologies. First, they contain a combination of technologies like GSM, GPS, Bluetooth, and Wi-Fi, which enable to get a location update. Where's the tracker? In addition to that, there's sensors inside, like temperature, humidity, impact, and light, which inform the conditions under which the goods are being transported. And last but not least, the information needs to get out of the tracker to the platform, to the smart platform, using communication technologies like GSM, because the tracker needs to work everywhere. And it will all be collected in the smart platform. I think Lucas already mentioned that in one of the questions earlier asked. And in this smart platform, all data will be stored, the location and the sensor data together with this timestamp, so that we know if there was a breach in temperature, when it took place. The platform also adds additional information to create logic to provide instructions to modify the tracker behavior based on the situation it is in, like the mode of transportation it is on or the location it is at. And it also is very important that the users get access to the information through various types of user interfaces. So there's the web management interface that typically is used by the people managing the trackers, the shipments, and the users. But for a warehouse worker or a ground handler which needs to take immediate action because something goes wrong, he needs to get notified on his smartphone by either a mobile app or instant messaging channels like WhatsApp. So how does it work in practice? Once a tracker is put inside a box or a container, it will record the location and the transportation conditions throughout the shipment. And it will automatically generate a location update at all the relevant toll gates along the shipment, like an airport, a warehouse, or a border crossing. And in case something goes wrong, it'll automatically generate an alert that there was a breach of temperature because a box of medicine was put outside the fridge at the warehouse airport. But obviously, customers and other users can also actively interrogate the system to know where a certain shipment is. And for the more advanced systems, the system can also generate an updated ETA of when the shipment is expected to arrive at the final destination. One of the challenges for IoT in logistics is the return logistics. So once the package arrives at the final destination, the tracker needs to get back to the factory or the logistics hub. And I think the best way to organize that is to either clearly mark the return address on the tracker and or combine it with sending a return envelope with it, so that the recipient can easily just put the tracker in a mailbox and get it back to where it should be. The benefits of using IoT fall roughly into three categories. One, it enables immediate action if something goes wrong. Secondly, it enables automating and improving existing processes. And three, it'll enable structural improvements of the processes over time. I will elaborate on all three a little bit more. So first of all, with IoT, the nearest ground handler or office worker can get notified in case something goes wrong. This can be the box of medicine outside the fridge, as I already mentioned during the presentation, but it can also be an expensive shipment of jewelry or watches which was tampered with or stolen during transportation, and then you need to take action immediately. And also it can prevent essential shipments, like, for example, spare parts of an ocean freighter or drilling equipment to be left behind at the departure airport, costing a lot of money because the freighter or drilling equipment cannot be put into operation at the estimated time. Secondly, IoT enables automating and improving existing processes. A good example of these are the administrative and financial processes. The real-time data of IoT enable automating the regulatory compliance, for example, in pharma, which removes a lot of paperwork. And the evidence of a shipment being received by the recipient in good condition will enable faster invoicing and payment. And in case something goes wrong, the real-time data of IoT can clearly pinpoint where the breach of temperature took place, and as a consequence, who was to blame and should bear the costs of this incident. And furthermore, if all people in the value chain can see where a certain shipment is, this will prevent individual customer support queries, which also will save costs. Thirdly and finally, if you gather all these data over time of all these shipments, you can see where the weak links in the whole supply chain are. You can see warehouse performances, you can see which routes are better to use, you can see shipping company performances and airline performances, which can lead to optimizations. And you can also, by monitoring all your assets, reduce the number of assets you use, for example, ULDs or trolleys, and you can also reduce the inventory of spare parts because you know where every individual part are. The benefits of this third element can be greatly speeded up by using AI or machine learning to use all the data which is there. The final slide of my presentation is addressed, as I promised, on implementing IoT. I think the overarching aim when you implement IoT for logistics should be to make it as easy as possible, to enable wide adoption of the technology and to limit errors. And at first we aim for what we call zero-touch IoT. I have three recommendations on how to get there. First, you should use widely available wireless and cellular technologies. This enables the device to work globally and without any additional infrastructure to be installed. Secondly, you should use a smart dynamic tracker and platform where the platform makes sure that the tracker automatically changes its behavior, its update interval based on the context, like the mode of transportation, the location, and also the destination it is heading for, to make sure the battery lasts until the destination, while also making sure that relevant notifications are received in time. And thirdly, to make sure these notifications are received in time and acted upon, you should make sure that you use the channels that these ground handlers and warehouse workers are using all the time, like their smartphone, to make sure that action is indeed being taken. That was all for my part. Thanks for your attention. And good luck in applying IoT in your own business. As I saw from the first poll, there's a lot of people still planning to do so. Thank you.
Indeed. Thank you, Jimmy. Again, also questions for you. Let's raise them later on. But one of the questions is about the risk that batteries could cause. So maybe you could think of that to answer later on. Let's move on to our next speaker today, David Pollender. Head of Business Development IoT for DB Schenker AG. David, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Bart. Now, Jimmy, Marion, and Lucas already gave us an interesting overview over the IoT topic. There was even one very interesting question about the interoperability between different devices, which I will elaborate on a little bit more later on. But first, I want to give an overview. Where is the IoT topic coming from, and how it will possibly change in the future from my experience. Even if IoT is a buzzword today, it's actually quite an old technology, and in fact it started already over 20 years ago, when we had the introduction of the first devices to track ocean containers. These devices were very bulky, and as I put it here, mainly for nerds who were interested in the technology and see what it can do. The services were not very reliable because they use a mobile phone network, and if you think back maybe 20 years, the coverage was spotty at best, especially in developing countries. So if you send your container with your tracking device somewhere to Asia, for example, you had a good chance that the device would not be able to connect to the mobile phone network, and therefore you would not see any data from this device. The devices were not connected to different data sources, or the service was not using different data sources. It was only relying on these tracking devices, and therefore they were not connected to anything. So they were your only source of information. The costs were very high. Such a big bulky box costed probably way over $1,000 or euros, and that's why you only use it to track very selected goods, if they are very valuable, for example. Now, if we move a few years forward, we come to the present state where we are today. IoT has changed a lot. The devices have become considerably smaller, more reliable, and also cheaper. Today we talk about small boxes that we can use, which have a global coverage, because we can today rely on very stable global networks and very stable global roaming agreements. Data is available everywhere, and the devices can communicate with the platforms to transmit their data. Because the devices have become smaller and cheaper, we can now track pallets or containers, and we are probably in the range of, depending on the device that you use and which features it has, maybe between 20 and 100 euro, I would say, for tracking one shipment. Also we have started to link different data sources together. So for example, if your tracker is in the air, it will not be able to transmit data, and we can connect or we can track the aircraft instead to still give you an ETA or show you the position on a map. Now, in the near future, we will have smart labels. They are still tracking devices, but will be very, very small and become very affordable with single-digit prices once we are able to produce them in large numbers. So technically, it is still a tracking device, but it is a very small one. That gives you a lot of advantages. One advantage, of course, as it is a label, as the name says it, you can integrate it, or the customer can integrate it already in its packaging process. So when you put everything in a box and make that ready for shipping it out, you can already apply a label, and then you have the possibility to track it really end to end. And that leads to the next stage here. If we have a sensor that's so small you can put it in a label, then you can obviously also put it in the box directly. So I guess we will see a lot of like smart packaging, which has sensors that are then able to transmit data. And a second trend will be that while we were connecting more and more data sources, we will have a really good overview of all the different devices in the supply chain. Meaning, if I know that my box is on a certain truck, I don't need to track the box. It's enough if I track the truck, and the truck has a GPS system that can give me the position. Or a forklift can tell me that my package has just been moved, and the device in the package tells me that there was a shock, for example. Or the dolly tells me that my box is on a ULD waiting outside on the apron in the sun, and I see from the sensors from my box that the temperature is rising. So it will be about connecting all the different data that is available. The cost will be very low, single-digit euros, and this will give us the opportunity to track basically everything. Now, coming back to the question, which was raised, I think that's a very good question, and one of the key aspects today of IoT. How do we ensure interoperability? And for me, this is also a topic of the connectedness of different services and data sources. At Schenker, we say we build bridges between different data providers and device operators. So we have started to build a platform where you can connect different data sources. For example, you can track ocean carriers or aircraft, and we can combine this with the data of different devices, which you attach to your cargo. We built an agnostic system. That means while we are obviously happy if we move your cargo, you can also use this for freight, which is moved by a different company. So it doesn't have to be DB Schenker shipment. We are open, we are agnostic, and you can even integrate your own sensors if you have a preferred sensor that you want to use. So I hope that answered the question concerning the interoperability. I think the platform is here the key, and it has to be open and agnostic. And that's good for me. Thank you for your time and attention.
Thank you, David. Quite interesting. One quick question. You mentioned the smart labels in near future, option 3, if I recall. What is near future you expect?
I expect them to arrive in the market as later this year, maybe Q3, Q4. But then one important thing, of course, we have economies of scale here. That means when I say I expect single-digit prices, this I don't expect for this year. This will be a small number, more like prototypes for POCs. And then if we really ramp up the production, the costs will go down significantly.
Okay, so this year, that's indeed near future. Thank you. In the meantime, we've launched the poll question for you, the third poll question. Which percentage of your cargo would be suitable for IoT in your opinion? Less than 20%, or between 20 and 50, less than 50%? Or 100%, or maybe this is not applicable for you. System is now collecting your responses, and percentage is increasing. I'll give it 10 more seconds. Okay, and this is for me a bit surprising.
Okay.
Lucas,
Yes. No. To me, it's in the bracket of what I observe. So on average, it's we see 50% that can be connected. 25% of the cargo flying in the world is special cargo, so this one can already be connected quite easily, and the rest can be connected through just following ULD or other things. So no, the distribution is matching what we observe in the industry.
Yeah. Okay, and let's go to the final question of today. What are your main concerns about IoT adoption? The panelists discussed challenges. So is it data privacy or security concerns, the high cost of implementation, lack of standards, maturity of the technology, or delivery of promised benefits? So the main concern. There were also questions from the audience about cost of implementation, if the transport cost will increase because of IoT. A very good question. Lucas, you highlighted security concerns, lack of standards. So there are quite a few concerns, but there are also the benefits. And I see that you're all voting, so that's good. 5 more seconds. So what we see here, Lucas, is that the delivery of the promised benefits is not a concern, and also it's not really the maturity of the technology. So that is good news. But what's your view on this?
No, I think it represents well our industry. I mean, the high cost of implementation, we are of course always concerned about it because it's impacting our margin and the difficulty to buy, like, for example, large fleet of sensor. So I am not surprised at all that is the first one who came up. I think it's aligned with our general cargo issue and expectation.
Yes, indeed. Thank you. Let's now go to our panelists and raise some questions to them also. So let's kick off with cost. We just saw that cost is an issue, or could be an issue. It's a concern for the audience, and there are questions also around it. David, you could comment on this, and Jimmy as well. We start with Jimmy. David, you mentioned cost also in your presentation, but Jimmy, you are a manufacturer and you deliver hardware. How do you see cost evolving?
Yeah, there's a couple of things. Obviously, the cost of implementing IoT are you can divide into several costs. So the cost of the devices, David already mentioned, they're going down. If you create a smart platform with an open API, the cost of implementing from an IT perspective and also connect with legacy systems can also go down dramatically. And because there will be more different flavors of devices, so a full device which can have GSM capability and the smart label that David mentioned already. We are working with one of those suppliers to do some projects already this year. Can also reduce, because then you can use a more expensive tracker on the really expensive high value shipments, and you can use smart labels for shipments which have a lower value and doesn't make a good business case if you use an expensive tracker. So I think in that way, the total cost of implementing IoT successfully will go down and make it available for more types of cargo, as we saw in the poll.
Okay, and David, how does this correlate with your experience?
Yeah, I think that's what Jimmy says is absolutely right. From my perspective, the main question is you have to look at your use case. Why do you want to use IoT in the first place? And how can you add value here to your product, yeah? Or reduce your costs could also be a possibility. Yeah? So give you one example. If you have if you use a tracking service, maybe even combine it with a security center that monitors your shipment, you might be able to reduce your insurance premium for this shipment, yeah? Because then you see, you can monitor, okay, container door, I get an alert when as soon as it's opened, and I have a security center which will check my SOPs and maybe even call the police or a guard, yeah? Then you might be able to negotiate a better deal with your insurance. So of course, you have costs to implement IoT. So you have to make sure that you also receive the benefits with which fit to your use case. So.
Okay. So Marion, that brings us to your field of expertise. Why? So David asked why IoT in the first place. I think that's all has to do with customer management experience. So, what is your view on the benefits and the why?
Yeah, as I said earlier, and I was just looking at the slide here with David also saying the focus will shift from tracking to connected data sources. So, as I said, IoT is yet another mechanism that collects data that allows us to do many things. And the other speakers have focused largely on process and how it improves those processes, which is, for me, only one side of it. It's also how you use that data, the same data that you use to improve your processes, to improve the customer experience and speak with one voice. So I see a lot of opportunity on that side with not just improving customer experience and creating a unified approach to how you deal with your customer, but also there will be disruptors to the businesses coming in that use that same data to give a completely different slant on it. So with every new technology that we add, with every new aspect that we add, there's always going to be changes in business models as well, and it's good to reflect on that too.
Yeah, data. That's the key, indeed.
And unified data. Yeah.
Yes. Okay, Lucas, something else about so David showed multimodal. Jimmy has experience with the airlines out of the passenger side. So, Lucas, in your view, what are the biggest challenges in building IoT for airlines and ground handlers?
I think that right now the maturity of the offer and of the tool that are available, it's still a challenge. The solutions are somewhat still kind of young and need to improve, which means that it's really the moment to experiment and to try at small scale and very validate what new does it bring to us and does it scale well. Try on a smaller port, on a small part of your operation, and then extend from it. But I think that, for example, in 2, 3, 5 years down the road, we will be in the big boom and it will be very, very mature. But right now, we still need to also to understand what it is about.
Yeah, and Jimmy, very quickly from your perspective, if you see this, how this evolved on the passenger side with suitcases, how's the adoption there compared to where we are?
Well, I think we were heading into the right direction in terms of new technologies being adopted and being used. But obviously, COVID had a big impact on the speed of innovation in that area last year. Seeing that most airlines have limited the amount of innovation they were doing on the passenger side, and mainly focused that on going to zero touch on the airport and doing everything to make sure that passengers can travel. So I think that's put a bit of a pause on some of the baggage innovation type projects.
Yeah. And David, and the last comment for you, it's also if you compare it to ocean freight, where in digitalization, ocean is sometimes ahead or ahead on the air cargo industry. What is your view on IoT in ocean?
Yeah, I think you have one major difference here where the implementation for ocean is a lot easier, yeah? Because for ocean shipments, you need almost no certification of devices. So it is really easy to attach a device to an ocean container, but it is really complicated to get a device into onto a ULD and then put it into an aircraft. Yeah? Especially if you are using different airlines for one business, yeah, and then you have to make sure that you always have the right device which fits to the right airline. So I think that's really really an issue why the implementation on the ocean side, from my perspective, is or the adoption rate is higher. Also, obviously, we have a lot of interest in the security aspect because, yeah, if you have a full container or a container full of, I don't know, smartphones, for example, you have really high values. So it makes sense to spend a little bit of money on the tracking, yeah, and also on the security of the tracking here.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Let's move on to the Q&A or the summary first. Lucas, could you summarize what we discussed today?
Yes, with pleasure. So we had a presentation from Marion that was all about the customer experience, and I think it's very important that we keep in mind our customer and our consumer. We explained us that the IoT is really a new technology that will help us to serve them better, and where the integration with the customer experience is key. Then I spoke a little bit about the future of IoT. That sensor will be everywhere in the future. I think it has been also quite stressed in the rest of my follower, and we must leverage the opportunity that you will present. I really think that it's now that we have to start to experiment and to create the new services that we'll sell tomorrow. Then Jimmy explained to us from a manufacturer standpoint how IoT transforms the logistic, what are all the benefits and new services that you can already get right now, and how to create and to implement and deploy them. Then David really did a very nice presentation about the past, the present, and the future of IoT, and represented more in depth what are the benefits of using platform to aggregate many sources of sensor into one solution that you can really use to transform your business.
Okay, thank you. So we only have 2 minutes left. So let's quickly go to the questions. First question, we discussed certification a lot. What are the required certifications for IoT devices in air cargo? Jimmy, do you know that? What are the required?
Yes, so there's a couple of things which manufacturers that have a device need to comply with. They need to have a device which is obviously certified for normal use, like the CE certification. Then the device needs to show by executing a DO-160 test that the device doesn't interfere with the aircraft equipment when on board. And the device also needs to show that it has 2 different ways of suspending transmission during the flight to make sure that it doesn't interfere with the aircraft equipment. And also the battery, and I mentioned you also had a question on battery, Bart-Jan. So the battery needs to be compliant with the IATA dangerous goods regulations, and it needs to be certified to make sure that there's no risk of the battery, which is mostly a lithium-ion battery, being damaged during the flight. So
Yeah.
it's quite a bit to make sure you comply with in order to get the certifications and the approvals.
Okay, thank you. So the last question, what does it take in terms of configuration to integrate new devices in your platform? David, you discussed your platform, so what does it take in terms of configuration to integrate new devices in your platform?
Yeah, our platform has a standardized API, and most of the or all of the device manufacturers also have a standardized API. So at the end, it's just, you have to connect the two platforms. So if you compare that like to IT projects in the past, yeah, where you spend months and thousands of dollars on it, it has become fairly easy. Yeah, there's no issue there, but sure, you have an integration effort for building the connection between the two systems. And then if the manufacturer adds a new device to his side, there is almost nothing you have to do. Once you have built the bridge between the two systems, data will be flowing, even if the manufacturer introduces a new device on his side.
Yeah. Okay, thank you, David. Thank you, panelists, for this presentation. The audience, there are other questions. We will get back to you on an email to you personally. I would like to thank everybody for joining this webinar, and please register for new webinars in the future. Thank you very much, and please stay safe. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Goodbye, everybody.